For those of you listening right now, joining me on Chaos is LittleBen, Ben Scott from LittleBen Productions. LittleBen isn't quite so little because he's about as tall as I am, and if he considers himself little, then I'm a midget. But regardless of the fact, Ben has been around quite a while in the music scene, putting on shows, promoting, booking, plays in a band. You guys got to check him out 2 weeks ago at Fuel, Firefight. You got to hear a track a second ago. That was Headless. And, Ben, I got to know,
yes,
man.
Sir.
What the hell drives you so much? What makes you so passionate about the music scene? Because you're a big player, man. You got shows going on left and right. You got this industry night that's every Tuesday night. I'll let you talk about that. And I'm going to shut up, man, because I just got to know what motivates you to do all this. I mean, what is it about the music scene?
Quite simply, deep down, I'm still a little kid that's a fan of music. I think any of us that work in this industry, you cannot effectively, do what you do if you're not a fan of music first and foremost. So for me, that's the driving factor. That's what drives me. Most of the bands I work with, I'm a fan of. For me, I don't really make a lot of money in this industry. The days of promoters that made tons of money passed with the 60s and 70s. So these days, promoters, most of the promoters I know do what they do because they love it, and it's a labor of love, and they're passionate about the music and passionate about the industry, and that's definitely what drives me. When I put on shows, if I see the crowds come in and they've got smiles on their faces and they have a good time and they love the bands that are on stage, I feel like I did my job correctly and I go home happy, and that's quite simply it.
I can admire that, man, because, let's be honest. There's people out there, they might make a few bucks doing a show, but, it's by no means a get-rich job. And, if you're doing it, you're putting all your time and all your work into it, there's got to be other reasons behind it than the money. And, just from what you said, that's why isn't there more people like you? What is it? Is money just becoming, it seems to be like ruling the world now and taking away from all the great music that's out there?
It does, and, I'm unique in the aspects that I don't have as much risk as a lot of people do, and what I mean by that is, I don't have any children. I grew up quite different than many people did, based on circumstances of my youth. I followed my dream. There's many people that, obviously do not want to lose the stability of their full-time jobs. They have families to support. Working in an industry such as this or any other industry that's art or entertainment-based always involves a lot of risk. So in my case specifically, I'm willing to take that risk. I don't have as much to lose as some people do. I definitely have, as you know, because you've gotten to know me quite well over the last year, more of an eclectic personality than some other people in this world. And so all of that kind of ties into where I can invest the time. I'm not so concerned with having a retirement plan or a pension. I live for today. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow, so I basically live my life as such where, I push every day to be the best I can be at what I do and quite simply leave it at that. And I don't fault anybody who plans for the future. Don't get me wrong. That's very smart, and family should be taken care of, obviously. But, in my case specifically, I know my place in this world, and I'm actually happy because there's a lot of people that still don't really know where they belong. They haven't really found, they'll go from job to job or career to career trying to figure out their niche or where they belong, and at least I know where I belong. I know what my place in this world is. When I leave this world, there will be no question mark. Everybody know who I was. Everybody know what I did, So for that, I'm very grateful and I'm very happy.
Man, you just got me depressed now. I'm sitting here thinking, have I found my niche? Am I still searching? I feel like I'm one of those people, I'm bouncing all over the place. You got me thinking now. Those are words of wisdom.
Not so much. When you hosted one of my industry nights, which you did a fantastic job at, you basically said exactly that. You were chasing with the radio thing, chasing one of your dreams. So realize it or not, you're doing what a lot of people are afraid to do. You're going after something, and as you mentioned, industry night, just like with me and my promotions business, you're not making tons of money hosting a radio show. It's a labor of love. It's something you're passionate about. It's something you believe in, and that's what's important. You have to be passionate about it. You have to enjoy it. I have friends that are filmmakers. I have friends that are models. I have friends in all aspects of entertainment, and they're chasing dreams, and they're happy. They're enjoying what they're doing. Most of them are not making a lot of money, but they're happy. They sleep well at night. They don't have insomnia issues where they're up for 10 hours a day. They personal self, what's the word I'm looking for? Confidence You know, a lot of that derives from feeling good about yourself and what you're trying to accomplish in this world. So I think that's important for anybody in any industry.
Now, you've been busting your ass for quite a while doing this, years from what I know. And I got to ask you, man, has there ever been a time where you felt like it wasn't paying off and you just felt like giving up? And if there was, what kind of boosted you to keep going with it, if you ever had that moment?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody has those moments, and I've had them more times than I can tell you. What keeps me going is quite simply I'm stubborn. I'd love to tell you something that makes me sound like some great wise guru, but the truth is I'm stubborn. And when it comes to me, you know, I don't like to say die. I don't like to feel like anybody got me down. Probably the worst part that I could tell you about was obviously the economy crash of 2009. That was a very hard time for me. It was a very hard time for anybody in any industry at that time because it was insanely bad. You know, so many people lost their jobs. Me as an event hoster, I saw the repercussions of that because I was hosting events that nobody was showing up to. Nobody had any money to go out. That was definitely a depressing time. And I at that time, I was working with some very big headliners that cost me a substantial amount of money. You know, so I lost a lot of money just like everybody else did around that period of time. So, you know, that was probably the only time I actually took about a 6-month hiatus based on the fact that I knew the economy was terrible. You know, there's obviously no point in pursuing hosting a bunch of shows and losing a bunch more money. But the moment things leveled out a little bit, I got back in business. And, you know, it's when you get discouraged, again, with anything in life, and I know I'm always generalizing things, but I think it's important, you know, if I have this avenue to talk to people to say, you know, anything you're passionate about in this world, you just have to stay at it. You know, success is measured in so many different ways. You know, I consider myself a very successful person, not because I have a bank account full of money, not because I'm, you know, some Hollywood celebrity. You know, to me, that's not success. Success is making an impact where you are. If you work in a restaurant and you're a waitress, if the customers love you and you do a great job and your coworkers love you, you're making an impact. You're impacting people's lives. You may not even realize that there's people that may come into your restaurant just because they want to see your face and you always make them feel a little bit better about their day. That's an impact. And I think a lot of people in this world don't realize how the little things count, you know, how you can impact people by just the little things that you do. So excel at what you're doing. If you get discouraged, if you get down, you just stay at it. You know, you do impact people's lives. Even with what you do, you know, with Chaos and you as an event promoter, you're impacting people's lives. And you can never sell yourself short on the effect and the impact that you have on other people. So I guess that would be my answer to that question.
Now, tell me about LittleBen Productions. When did you start it? And tell us about the company, man. What all does LittleBen Productions entail as far as everything you do?
LittleBen Productions as a company has, like any company, definitely gone through some changes over the years in my model and how I approach my business. The LittleBen moniker, everybody asking this question, you haven't yet, I'm sure you're going to at some point, but the LittleBen moniker actually, ironically, came from one of the bands I was in way back in my past. You know, we toured around, and the drummer, Ben Wyatt, was a 200-plus guy, great drummer, but, you know, a little weightier guy, and when the singer would say Ben, we'd both say what. He got tired of that, so that kind of went over to LittleBen and Big Ben, and it stuck. So when I started booking and promoted shows, I carried the moniker with me, and I've had it for 15-plus years now. To answer your question, LittleBen Productions in its current state basically represents specifically a promotions model that's not very common at this point in time, which is I try to actually bring the crowds to the bands versus having the bands bring the crowd to the venue. And the way I accomplish that is I include extra things in the events that I host, whether it be comedy, burlesque, contests, things that will attract a general audience. I select my bands based on their musical capability and their professionalism versus on how many people they can bring into a room. Now, with all of the talks and industry discussions that, especially over the last year or two, that I've had with quite a few great promoters and industry people, you know, there's nothing wrong with a band having a good fan base. There's nothing wrong with a band that can promote itself effectively. And, you know, I wholeheartedly agree that everybody should work. You know, bands should promote themselves. They should work hard at their art. But that doesn't excuse promoters and venues from their responsibilities. Right. And as a promoter, I feel like I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility. You know, promoting is basically you're a marketer. You know, so I have to market the shows that I'm hosting. I've actually invested. I haven't done it in the last due to my financial situation. But when I'm up, I invest a lot of the money that I earn into radio commercials, TV commercials, magazine advertisements. I market to the best of my ability. That's why I never make any money. When I've actually got money, I spend it on advertising. But that's what you got to do with a business. You just got to keep spending the money to try to get attention to your company, to try to get attention to the events that you're hosting. I definitely would say that the thing I'm proudest about where LittleBen Productions is concerned is I host the type of events that people remember. They walk out of there, that was a fun night. I hosted at Alki Tavern in West Seattle. It was my first time hosting there a month or so ago. We had a Star Wars party. They had a crowd surfing R2-D2, while the bands were playing. It was just a lot of fun. And, people would be, in my opinion, as it is, people would be way more excited to go out and pay money to get into shows if it was a fun event versus just a few bands playing. Probably the only advice that I would give any promoter or booker out there or venue owner that may be listening to this broadcast, bring something extra. Every night you open your doors, bring something extra. Find an appeal to the general audience because that's how you're going to get them in the door. Tell your doormen to stop saying live music when people ask them what's going on that night. Say a band name. Live music sounds so impersonal. Like
it's kind of
you're not even wanted there. It's very true. I watch people walk away. I've been to so many venues, and there's a great show going on, and somebody walks up and, hey, what's going on tonight? And the doorman looks at them blandly, live music. How is that going to inspire somebody to walk in the door and spend money? So yes, LittleBen Productions represents that. And on top of that, I've also been on a crusade, which is actually finally coming to fruition, to network and build a group of promoters, bookers, and bands versus everybody working against each other. I'm finally very, very grateful for this, based on many people in my network right now. Finally starting to see this come around and people working together, and it's fantastic. And it's yielding huge positive results for everybody involved.
Well, speaking of your industry night, Tuesdays, One Eye Jacks, 8 o'clock, right here in Linwood, man. You have put together a forum for everybody, man. You want to tell people about industry night and why it's very important? And I stress this to everyone listening right now. If you're involved in music, the music scene, listen to what Ben
Absolutely.
has to say about industry night.
Absolutely. And before I get into industry night, I want to definitely give a special appreciation nod to Tom, the owner of One Eye Jacks there in Linwood. He got right on board with industry night with me, and great venue owner. It's a great venue, very friendly people. When I was discussing about the door guys at Stair Blandley, this gentleman represents what venues should be. He has a super friendly staff. The venue is fantastic. He loves music. He loves, having the live bands in. He gets excited about every show, So my hat's off definitely to One Eye Jacks, and that's why I'm definitely happy to host industry nights there. That said, to answer your question, we opted for a Tuesday night based on the fact that with a weekday thing, we are not competing with, weekend live shows. We definitely don't want to do that. And we also start early and end early. I think most of our industry nights are always done by between 10 and 11 o'clock at the latest. Or for those of you listening thinking already, I'd have to be at work the next day, we get out of there pretty fast. The industry night in itself is a forum. It's an open forum. And what it means by open forum is you can promote anything. The venue is not going to be upset because you're promoting, one of your events or one of your shows at another venue. It doesn't matter. It's open forum. You can bring in your merchandise, try to sell your gear. Promoters are welcome. Other venue personnel are welcome. Bands are welcome. Musicians are welcome. Bands and musicians is definitely the target audience because what we're trying to do, we're not trying to teach, we're trying to learn. And that's what's great about industry night is, we're getting a group of people in there to learn from each other. We're trying to build and make our industry stronger. And we've had people from Seattle, Bonnie Lake, all over the place that have come to these industry nights, drive huge distances to come out to these things, which is amazing. It blows my mind. We've had not just industry people, but, we had a woman in the bar walk up in the middle of one of our meetings and wanted to ask a question. Turned out she had a daughter who was 17 or 18 that was a musician and was considering moving to California. So we get in this huge conversation because this woman was seeking advice from industry professionals. How should I approach this? And, it toes the line between a parenting issue and an industry issue. But from the industry aspects, we tried to help her as best we could. And, so that was an amazing thing to happen, you know, to actually advise somebody who wasn't really, you know, doesn't know anything about the industry. So there's a lot of different aspects, and we're still learning as we host these things. We have a guest speaker every night. The speaker is someone in the industry, of course, and they give a presentation, and we have a Q&A portion, so people can showcase their businesses, even their bands. You know, if you're listening to this and you're in a band and you think your band is doing some great things but not enough people know about it, hit us up. We'll have you be a guest speaker one night, talk about your band and talk about your impressions on the industry. Nobody is above anybody on industry night. We're all equals, and that's the most beautiful thing about it. We're all people in the industry that are just working towards a goal. You know, there is nobody that is above anybody on these nights. And I've had experiences with people in the industry that think they're better than other people, you know, musicians, promoters, all kinds of different people that just have these unfortunate attitudes of, you know, I don't need this, I don't need that. I'm sorry to say this, but I honestly believe anybody that's in this industry that passes up opportunities for nights like this to learn and to network and to interact is stupid, because you're not even taking your business seriously. Because why would you not take this opportunity? Even if I were not hosting this night, if I'm aware of it, I'd be there every night. Every night I'd be there to network, to meet people, to learn, you know, because I want my business to be strong. Or if you want your band to be strong, you know, you have to take these things seriously, because what we're doing is amazing, and everybody that's been there has had a fantastic experience. So it's definitely very new. I think we finished our third week last week. Or no, second week, actually. You are our first guest speaker, which you did a fantastic job, by the way. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Definitely appreciated it.
That was a great night. And go ahead.
I gotta know, man, because you kind of got my bell ringing with what you were talking about some of these people that aren't taking it serious and stuff. And you know, I want to add to that because, you know, I've seen some flack over these industry nights, and people have talked, well, I've been to those before in the past, and they're bullshit. Now, what gets me is if you're involved in the scene, and like you said, how could you not get out and do that to either better your business, your band, or the most important thing of all, help better the scene? What do you think drives these people that are kind of going off rogue and doing their own thing and just kind of being that way? I mean, what is it? Is it ego, or is it just, you know, I don't get it, man. I just can't fathom why, you know, people are like that.
There's many, you know, and actually what we're getting into kind of makes me laugh. It's more of a psychological issue than an industry issue. You know, there are just certain people that see things in a different light. They're after different things, you know. And it's to be expected. I mean, it's, you know, the perfect world scenario. Everybody would network, and everybody would be all about the team, and things would be fantastic. But obviously, we do not live in a perfect world. So I think, not to sidestep your question, but I think what's more important versus trying to figure out why these people do it is just to try to learn how to make what we do strong. Maybe they see what we're doing, they may come around and say, wait a second, maybe I was approaching this in the wrong light. You know, the one thing I do know psychologically about people is you cannot change people. I don't care how great you think what you have going on is, or you know, people are going to do what people are going to do. You can't just turn around and change them. So,
right.
You know, it's an unfortunate thing, but, you know, I think just doing what you do and trying to make it strong, if you inspire other people. I'm very, very proud of the fact, and I won't name names, but there's a couple different promoters that email me quite often, solicit advice from me, that my opinion matters to them. And that in itself is a huge thing to me, you know, that people look up to me in that aspect, that they actually, you know, want my opinions on their business and have, you know, want my advice on certain things. And that's huge for me, you know. And so those you know, the people that are, you know, they think that they don't need, you know, to network, they think that they've got things figured out. They very well may not. But they're not helping our scene, unfortunately,
right.
Because, you know, the scene grows and it builds through a team effort and through a network, and I've always wholeheartedly believed that. Even myself, I'm guilty of, you know, at times getting a little over exuberant when I'm you know, upset at somebody's practices, but I have to really remind myself to dial down, because the thing is, not everybody is LittleBen Productions. You know, I can't expect everybody to run their business exactly like I run mine. You know,
right.
I have to be open-minded. I have to be, you know, everybody's going to run their prospective booking and promotions companies a different way, you know. But as long as we're communicating and working together, it ends up being okay. There's specifically a promoter that I've been talking to at length newer promoter on the scene, and again, just to save names, I won't mention her name, but I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Our practices are very different as to how we throw shows and as to how we book and promote shows and how we, take care of the bands. However, we've definitely found a huge mutual respect and a middle ground, and through many conversations, I consider her a colleague, I consider her a friend at this point, and so that's a fantastic thing, for us to actually be able to communicate on that level.
I got to go back. I got to go back to what you said about these guys that are, maybe in time they're going to see what you're doing with the industry night, and how it's a benefit, and how they're sitting there thinking, maybe I'm going about it the wrong way. No, maybe they're going to sit there and think, wow, I really am an asshole. Maybe I should get on board. Oh, man.
Well, I just, I wouldn't say asshole. I mean, people have obligations, but I will say that, if you have, say if you have a band, you have 3 or 4 people in your band, why wouldn't you send at least, every band's got that 1 or 2 band members that either doesn't have a job or is on unemployment or has got a little free time going on. Why would you not send one of your band members and say, hey, go to this industry night, meet some other bands, meet some promoters, Let's network it up a little bit. Because I will tell you this, even the industry nights we've hosted so far have included promoters that host shows all over this state, okay? And everybody's passing out business cards and people are networking. Why would you not want to be a part of this? You can bring your CDs and shirts. You may sell a few CDs and shirts at this thing, The sky's the limit. We're really building the big thing we're doing right now is building the word, and thank you, by the way, for this forum to do that. Spreading the word and building the network of people to make this industry night a huge thing. Within the next month or so, we should have attendance of 100 plus every time we do it. It should be a huge thing because, this is the opportunity for all of us in this scene to network. It's that one place where everybody can go. It's open forum. You're not going to piss anybody off. The owner is going to be fine. The other bands are going to be fine. You can promote, network. You might meet a band that you always wanted to hang out with or meet and do a show with, and that's your opportunity because they're there at industry night too, and it's like, hey, we always wanted to play a show with you guys. And, oh, cool, yeah, let's do a show together. That type of thing, that's what this is about. Because the only other industry nights, quote, unquote, I'm doing the air quotes, you can't see it. The only other industry nights are shows. Bands go to see other bands' shows, and promoters go to support other promoters, and, but what's going on? The bands are playing, so it's loud. It's hard to talk to anybody. Or you got to go outside and freeze in the cold, talk to somebody or to network. This gives us an opportunity to go inside a nice warm building. We opted to not have live music or anything going on during the industry night so people can talk and they can network, And I think that's really important. I think it's important for people to have that forum, and it's people hanging out at a bar, It's not, it's a big show, we got to do this, we got to do that. It's like, here's a spot where we can all go, hang out, have some beers, eat a tasty hamburger from One Eyed Jack's, and talk about our business, talk about our band, talk about our promotions company, talk about our venue, and get more people not just interested but knowledgeable about it. I think that's huge, personally. I've already met a bunch of people that had no clue LittleBen Productions existed, and I'm that guy that walks around the world thinking everybody knows who I am. Ooh, I'm Rick James, No, there's tons of people. Yeah, tons of people that have no clue what I'm doing or what's going on. Probably tons of bands, Granted, like you said, I've been around a long time, so even I have this slight ego where I just assume that a lot of people know about my company or know who I am, but of course they don't, And this scene is always growing and changing. Promoters are popping up right, left, and center. New bands are popping up right, left, and center. Some of the old schools are still around, and that's great. I consider myself to be one of the old schools at this point, and I'm proud of that. But I'm also really proud of the fact that there's all these great new promoters. And, so for my part, I'm supporting them. That's why I support you, and I support Skid Row Productions and Dysfunctional and all these new promotions companies, MLA Booking, that pop up. I want to support them because they represent the new scene. If I go away in the next year or so, you never know what's going to happen. This is going to be the new scene. This is going to be the new crop of promoters. Why would I not want to support them and network with them and be proud of the people that are taking up the torch, as it were, Because other than myself and some others, there's basically Trey with Epidemic Records, and then there's Mike Thrasher, and these guys that do the big end, like the Showbox shows and the big end shows where the national bands are involved. But other than those two guys, pretty much our whole entire scene is people like me, that are putting on shows. And they're taking a lot of risk when they put on shows. And they're the ones that are basically our local scene. So it's very important to me to know who's in that scene and who's doing what and why they're doing it, because that affects the Seattle. It's so huge. I don't think these people realize how huge this is. That's why I'm so happy. My dream was always to work in the Seattle rock scene. Boom. I work in the Seattle rock scene. I made that dream happen.
Damn, there you go.
It's so huge when you realize the impact you have on a city like Seattle, which is known for its rock music. A lot of people say grunge. Screw that. It's rock. Okay, Alice in Chains, rock band. All right, I'm gonna probably piss a lot of people off. I don't care. Soundgarden, rock band. Nirvana could have maybe been called a grunge band because of the way they dress, but they're still a rock band. Okay, Seattle's a great city for rock music, plain and simple. A quick nod and hats off to great metal scene that's out there in the metal bands. It's not just about the rock music, but specifically, I'm a rock promoter, so I'm proud to work in the scene of great rock music. And it's still out there. The bar is very, very high right now. There's some fantastic, amazing bands in Seattle that could easily tomorrow play in front of 10,000 people and sound better than half these national bands that are touring around right now. Probably more than half of them. We're not talking about a bunch of guys that. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you kind of hit a stickler there for me. So, is it safe to assume that if you were a band back in the '90s and you wore flannel, you're automatically considered grunge? I mean, really, is that all it is just the flannel?
Pretty much. And I can say that because I'm not from Seattle, so the impression, it's and this is inescapable in life. But people have impressions. People have stereotypes. A lot of the people, I'm from the Southwest, and, a lot of people like down in Oklahoma, Kansas, and those areas, when they think Seattle, that's exactly what they think of. Oh, the flannel shirt and the grungy, and I've got nothing against. There are still some bands out there that represent that somewhat, and they're great bands. I have nothing against that. But what I do have is, the message to people that, Seattle is so much more, and it's a scene of great rock and roll music. There's tons of great bands. I could sit here and flip out name after name after name after name, but a lot of these bands you've had on your show, you're aware of the talent level of these acts that are in Seattle right now, and the only thing that, I have not achieved, the one dream that I have more than anything else is to see some of these bands that have this level of talent actually get their shot. I'm actually working towards that right now, and I'm working with a label out of Arizona. I'm excited to hear back from them. I was able to send some Seattle bands their way. No big news on that yet, obviously, because I need to hear back. But, starting to open doors and try to create real opportunities for some of these acts, that are deserving of it. And, the quality of music and the level of their professionalism cannot be ignored. This cannot be ignored. The band that always comes to mind, the only band I will just mention right off the cuff, because I think they're, in my humble opinion, one of the most fantastic bands the state has to offer right now is the C2. And the C2, there's no reason, I would say 70% of these national acts that are touring around on labels don't have the quality of music that a C2 has, don't even have close to quality of music, So for bands like that, to see them playing a bar for 30 or 40 people, which is great, they had a great, fantastic show at Studio 7 a couple weeks ago. The place was packed out, They blew my mind once again. It never stops with those guys, It's blowing my mind why they can't get an opportunity.
You know what?
Sorry.
You know what, Ben? You know what I think we should do? I think we should give the masses a little dose of the C2. What do you think?
Hey, it sounds good to me.
All right. So, hey, you heard Ben talking them up. Now you're going to find out why this is a C2 with The End of Evil.